and a very warm welcome to this UKAAF webinar on World Braille Day, when we remember and celebrate the life and work of Louis Braille, whose name is synonymous with the reading and writing system used by many people throughout the world. This event is called Towards 2 Centuries of Braille. My name is Roger Furman from the UK Association for Accessible Formats. I'm delighted you have joined us. It is a great pleasure to welcome our presenters, Helen Wilson, a UKAAF board colleague, who wholeheartedly believes that everyone should have access to information. This she has been pursuing both professionally and personally. Helen is studying for a PhD, focusing on accessibility awareness education in schools. Ed Rogers, who leads the work of Bristol Braille Technology, and it seems hardly possible that Ed has been on this journey since 2008, with all that has so far been achieved. I'm going to ask Helen whether she would like now to present to us. And thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Yes, to start this webinar off, I was lucky enough to speak with Sean Randall at New College, Worcester, which will add more context in his role once I've presented the video. He kindly helped me to put together a 10-minute video about Braille and some of his personal experiences and the benefits of Braille in the digital age. He shared some very useful facts that I'm really keen to share more widely to educate people. But he's also added some very powerful personal reflections on how technology has enabled Braille for him in our digital society. So I shall now share my screen for you to watch the video.
My name is Sean Randall. I am a totally blind teacher of IT and access technology here at New College. My role is to work one-on-one with our students and the access equipment, software and hardware they need to make sure they can use technology both for their studies and when they go out into the wider world to be successful visually impaired adults. Braille, in a nutshell, is a code, tactile code, that means you touch it, used to represent language. So it can be any language, it hasn't got to be English, there are Braille codes for languages all over the world. It's a way by which running your fingers over a line of these dots that you can read letters, numbers and anything else you care to produce. Braille's not a language of its own, it's a code representing an existing language like English. And each Braille dot is formed of 6 pins or cells, and by putting dots in different positions in the cell you represent different letters, numbers or symbols. So this is a volume of comb-bound paper Braille. This is actually a play that a student would learn their lines from before being a school performer. This is single-sided Braille. Most of the time you would have Braille on both sides of the paper, not just one, but they do them single-sided for people who are just learning. The interesting fact though here is that this volume in its entirety is probably between 20 or 25% of an average fiction novel as a whole. So one print story for a teenager would be maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 or even more of these. These represent a very small fraction of a book as a whole. Historically, Braille was just marks on paper, but in the digital age, in the modern age, Braille has come with us and it's usable for everything, all sorts of things. You can read and write emails, text messages, be on your WhatsApp groups and in your Teams chats. You can play games, you can use Braille for making sure you're taking the right medication, and generally anywhere in your life, in my life certainly, where print could be read, Braille is there as an alternate source of media to make sure that I can access the same material that everybody else can access. One of the really cool things about Braille is that the numbers are the same as the first 10 letters of the alphabet. So the same symbol representing the letter A also represents the number 1, right up to J for 0. So when you've learned half the alphabet, you can also do all the numbers, which is pretty cool. You can also read Braille through other things. It's a party trick to hand out medication from boxes and bags that you can't see through, but you can feel through. And Braille is a tool that even if you are not fully blind, the sooner you start learning it, the quicker you tend to find you become later on. I've been very privileged to work with so many students who are losing their eyesight more gradually. By bringing Braille in at the right time for them, it really makes the transition to more total or permanent blindness that much easier. It's literacy, it's independence, and it's access, and it's absolutely amazing. One of the other benefits to mainstream technology merging well with Braille is something like a calendar. So we've got a family calendar to which the whole family adds things and checks things. I regularly add things to the calendar using my Braille display connected to my phone, for example. My wife will add things from her laptop. My daughter will add things verbally from her smart speaker. My mother-in-law will add things on her phone as a sighted person would. And we've got all these different levels of access, all going into the same place. The whole family can see the calendar, can change things around, can check dates and times. And regardless of the input method or the output method, we all see the same material. The same thing applies with books. So if I want to read a book, I'll buy it on Amazon, on the Kindle, and I can choose to read that using the text-to-speech voice on my phone, laptop. I can choose to read that using my Braille display connected to the phone, laptop, or the Kindle. My daughter can look at the Kindle physically and see the pictures, and it's, again, the important thing here is it's the same content. So when I was a child, Braille books had to be made special. They were produced and bound by experts who knew Braille, and that was very helpful, but it meant that the copy of the book I was reading was a different copy to the book he would read. Whereas now we can all access the same source text and read it using a different type of device. So picture the Braille display as a different type of screen or a pair of glasses. I'm using it to access the content underneath, the same content that you'd access with your eyes. And that's where the merging of mainstream technology and Braille really comes into its own. So I was lucky enough to have access to a Braille display and a tablet when my daughter was young, and the bedtime stories were huge for me. I wasn't read to as a child, and so I spent a lot of my childhood in my own head. As a father, sitting on the bottom of that bed, having the hot chocolate and the bedtime stories, reading together, having access to the text together. Paper Braille, to me as a child, was quite isolating anyway, because I went to a mainstream school. Nobody could understand Braille. It was my own special thing. And if I'd only had paper Braille to read to my daughter, it would have been an isolating thing. She wouldn't have had access to the pictures. We wouldn't have been on the same page, which is what the technology has let us do. It's let us be looking at the same book. Yes, in different ways. She uses her eyes, I use my fingers, but we are exploring the same content, and that was really magical. And that's without the Harry Potter, which was also quite magical as well. There has been a decline, I'm sorry to say, in the number of children learning Braille, and that has correlated, unfortunately, with the increase in how much technology can talk to you. Almost every device on the market you could buy nowadays has the ability to speak, and I think part of the concern for me as a blind adult and as a teacher is that it's easier for sighted people to comprehend how a device can talk to you than it is to how you can turn text into Braille. That said, all the devices now also let you Braille in as well. Braille hardware is coming down in price all the time, and Braille is by no means dead and gone. It's a part of my life every day. It's a part of the lives of the students I teach more often than it's not at the moment, and that's only going to grow, because as we get technology to give us more access to text and wider access to other information, Braille is going to be one of the ways we can absorb that information and work with it. To many of us, it's a natural medium, and I'm very glad that despite the costs and despite the complexities, it's stuck around, it's part of who we are, and it's embedded in almost every facet of what we do every day. Over the last sort of decade or two, I've seen Braille become more and more accessible, not necessarily more prevalent, but more accessible when you've got access to equipment already. My two wishes for Braille are that firstly the technology becomes more widespread, cheaper and more widely available, more reliable, so you can buy it without having to remortgage or get a job where the government pay for it for you. But also that people, the content producers, the creators, the authors, the publishers, respect the barriers that they are putting in place, perhaps unintentionally, that stop us reading Braille. So for a long time, apps like Kindle weren't accessible. Publishers who locked down ebooks so you have to read them on one screen meant that the Braille displays couldn't read them either. The awareness that if you're putting text out there in a document, on the internet, in an email, however it may be, that it might not be read with someone's eyes. It might be read using an alternative source. It might be read using a Braille device. And just that people know what they're doing in terms of accessibility when they block other options from accessing their text, and the damage that can do. Those are my two real wishes. In terms of technology, I hope that we get Braille displays that can show more Braille than one line at a time. You've seen with the Orbit and the other equipment that the displays are quite small at the moment. It would be nice to have access to more than one line at a time, because I've already told you that one volume of Braille is only a small amount of a print book. So one line of Braille on the Braille device is only maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe if you've got a bigger Braille display, 8 or 9 words. So that's quite a short line. To read aloud fluently, to be comfortable projecting Braille as a user, I need a bit more than that. So I'd hope that Braille gets bigger, becomes more widespread, engages in the public consciousness, so that people will work on producing cheaper, more flexible, more powerful devices. I would love to see Braille have the understanding that subtitles have on TV. Everyone knows what subtitles are for, they're almost always available, and everyone understands that if you can't keep up with what you're listening to or you want to have that reassurance, you turn the subtitles on. If Braille had that awareness in the public consciousness, then I think we'd be a lot better off going forward.
Thank you for watching. Smiley.
Helen, thank you very much for making the video, and I'm sure we can come back to some things later on in this meeting. I'd now like to move on to Ed, as I know you have something very interesting for us today. Over to you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Also, I see we're joined by Stuart now in the presenters. And so, yes, thank you for inviting me on. We're, as you say, from Bristol Braille Technology, and we released the Canute 360. This is a 9-line Braille display. We released that back in 2019, 2020, around the sort of Christmas period there. And that is a 360 cell Braille display, so it's 40 cells by 9 lines. But today I want to talk about not that machine, which has been on sale for several years now, but on what we've started to do with it in the last 18 months or so. So what are we doing with 9 lines of Braille? What are we doing with a whole 360 cells of Braille? These are refreshable Braille cells. It presents us with a great opportunity, and sometimes the different options can almost be overwhelming of which directions do you go in. So that's what I wanted to discuss today, because I think a big part of the future of Braille is how Braille how refreshable Braille takes us into new areas, including some of the things I'm going to run through, which is computer science, which is a very well established use for Braille, but moving into data visualization or tactualization, if you like, spatial navigation of maps and so on, even things like sports, visualizing or tactualizing the position of players and so on in sports games, and indeed video games, and getting on to the really big one, which is tabular data for finance and other uses of numbers in Braille. So firstly, I'm going to talk about our new product, which was released in 2023, and it's called the Canute Console. So this includes a Braille display, a bit like the L Braille, which many people will be familiar with. The Canute console is built of two parts. It has the Braille display, which is the Canute, then it has the dock into which that sits. And that includes a visual monitor, a high contrast, large print visual monitor, and a pull-out keyboard. The keyboard slides in and out from underneath the display. The monitor folds down on top of it. And the big thing we're doing here, well, firstly, we're concentrating on the initial use case. We're concentrating on the command line because we wanted to start with technical subjects where we feel, which for reasons I'll come to later, we can really maximize the use of Braille very quickly and its usefulness. And so where that led on to is this, as I think one of the only devices, I don't know of another one, which has one-to-one parity of the data on the visual display as is on the tactile reading display. It's a monitor, 13-inch monitor, which shows 360 characters of print text, which is reflected in the same position to within about 1/8 of an inch underneath it in Braille. Of course, if you choose different Braille codes, there won't be one-to-one in every case. But if you're going for a one-to-one Braille code, you can trace the Braille and then put your hand up on the screen and know what you're pointing at. And therefore, people can work together without regard of whether they are a fluent tactile reader or visual reader, or there's two people who read in different ways. So those are the areas we're concentrating on. With the Canute console, that's been released through our website and through our distributors, some of whom are on this call. The other thing we're concentrating on as our development of Braille hardware is price. Specifically, making sure that although Braille does remain expensive and isn't likely to change in the near future, I think, and we all at Bristol Braille think, that it's important that when we advance into the multi-line era of refreshable Braille, that doesn't increase the price of the unit per display. So if you want to buy a Braille display, we think that when we go to multi-line, it should cost approximately the same as equivalent 40-cell device. That's what we've done with our display, costing approximately the same as a 40-cell Braille display. And the console, which is the upgraded version with the screen and the keyboard, that costs approximately the same as many note takers. Otherwise, if the price inflates every time people add more Braille onto it, you essentially lock out those who have come to rely on and have invested their time and energy into becoming excellent at Braille and learning how the technology works with Braille. You lock them out of these exciting new developments. So the areas of interest that we are developing the Canute console for, I mean, we're not just building it because it's bigger and better. We're building it because we had some specific interests we wanted to pursue, which are about spatial Braille. And there's been a divide, of course, between refreshable Braille, which has been used for any sort of data which can be made linear, and any data which can't be effectively made linear does not work effectively in refreshable Braille, and you have to revert to things like swell paper or other solutions. I'll start with computer science because it's what I mentioned at the top here. Programming and log files simply work a lot better. For some people, lots of people are happy with single line displays, but for many people, especially those who are working with a sighted colleague or sighted student or sighted mentor, having multiple lines, 9 lines, which means that you can see a large part or an entire part of the function, and it can all be indented, and the indentation looks identical on the visual display as it is on the tactile display, is a very powerful way of opening up computer science to new students. Following on from that, data visualization. So one of the things we've been playing around with a lot is how you represent data in Braille. We're using spatial Braille because another big subject in the industry at the moment is tactile graphics. Now our focus is on using Braille letters in 2D space. So we don't try and draw lines and shapes which look identical to a bar graph, for example, we use Braille letters, which are spaced the same as a bar graph, but the letters might be AAA, so you can trace that, and you can then refer to a key. And this is because a lot of people have not had access to tactile graphics in its full in lots of instances. And so reverting back to Braille, using the Braille letters rather than breaking it down and trying to do dotty graphics, you can very quickly compare a lot of data. I'll give you an example of something we're working on at the moment: a condensed scatter graph. So scatter graphs can be very difficult to represent in Braille, even if you've got an embosser and the largest sheet of paper in the world, because Braille is so much larger and has fixed width. Trying to accurately position the different dots is very hard to do. So we've come up with different methods which condenses that down. But when you move your cursor over one of the points on the scatter graph, the bottom line tells you precisely what information is in that represents. This is getting a little technical, but I think for those who have to crunch through a lot of data and they want to be able to intuit quickly the difference between one set of numbers and another set of numbers in the same way as their sighted colleague, with the same speed, without having to read all the source data, it's very powerful. Speaking of powerful use of spatial information, one of the other things that we've been developing the most and are most pleased with, it's a slightly different field entirely, really, and this is spatial navigation, in particular mapping. So on the Canute console, we have maps which you navigate using a cursor, which is essentially your character, which has a top-down view represented as Braille letters, which have different letters to represent different building types, which is taken from OpenStreetMaps, and you can move around the street and move in and out of buildings and learn the spatial differences between buildings. And of course, you can use that for planning trips, for just exploring. And we're already using it to plug into video games. The simplest one we've done is Snake, but we've also done various sort of top-down exploring the world kind of video games. This is all using the same core display, 40 cells by 9 lines. It's such a flexible format. A similar thing we've been playing with, and this really is getting to playing around for the fun of it, and why not, is sports. We've made an application which shows the top-down view of the football pitch with a flag in each corner represented by an F, the goal, the 18-yard box, which is represented by different Braille symbols, and you follow the ball around as the game progresses. I didn't have any specific reason for building that. I just thought it was a very interesting example of demonstrating what you can and can't do with Braille. And that only took a couple of hours to throw that together using data available on the internet. We did the same for cricket. And as Roger and I were talking about before this, I was reminded that it's an Olympic year, I believe, and a Paralympic year as well. So just what could we do with that? How could we represent the progress of different runners around a track? I'm going to move on to the last one here because I don't want to take up too much of our time. I want to leave time for everyone to chat to each other. But a really big one at the end here is moving back to something much more sober, if you like. And this is something where I think refreshable multi-line Braille will make the biggest impact on our industry and on our lives. And that's in tabular data, especially for finance, personal finance, business finance, and so on. By tabular data, I mean tables. I mean calendars. Just like Sean was talking about earlier, I mean spreadsheets. I mean being able to look at spreadsheets, not one cell at a time, but where it's rendered into columns and rows. Because really, tables at the moment are either interpreted one cell at a time, either through text-to-speech or through a Braille display, which is not how tables are expected to be interpreted when they're put together, or they are embossed out. Being able to flexibly move around a spreadsheet, which is all visible, and the same thing is visible to any sighted person that you happen to work with, and you can compare notes, so useful for accounts and ledgers and so on. So my final point I'd like to say is all of this stuff is stuff we are working on, and we're working on with people who are our customers, but also people who are just interested in it. and we are very pleased to announce that we're going to have a Braille Centre opening in Bristol around March time, where we'll be testing and trialing all of that I've been discussing, and people are welcome to come in, and we'll even be arranging transport for people to be able to come in and try all this stuff, specifically because we're a not-for-profit and our purpose is to advance the uses of Braille and the amount of Braille, and that's what we hope the Canute console will do.
Ed, thank you so much for that interesting and most enlightening talk. I'm sure Louis Braille would be delighted to know that boundaries are still being pushed and still need to be pushed. So thank you. We'll probably try and come back to some things later on. Now, I'd like to welcome Stuart, and I know Stuart Lawler from Sight and Sound Technology. Stuart, I think you have a video for us, so thank you very much for putting that together. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Roger, can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud.
Brilliant.
And clear.
Okay, so we had some Teams issues earlier, so thank you very much for the opportunity, and good afternoon, everybody. It's hard to follow Ed Rogers because Ed's always doing exciting and innovating things, and it's great to be. I think sometimes when you come to sessions like this, it's just great to sort of be around other people in the industry and hear what's going on. So I'm from Sight and Sound Technology, and I suppose on a day like World Braille Day, we're passionate about Braille as well, and we've been providing a range of Braille technology, and we've seen it change over 44 years, I think it is now, since we started. And I think one of the things that has remained constant for us is finding the very best Braille devices in the market that will fulfill the needs of our customer base. So I'm going to talk about two things today that are kind of new, or things that we've been doing over the last year. The first is something called Split Braille, which has just come in JAWS 2024, which is the latest version of the screen reader from Freedom Scientific, which was released in November. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with note takers in the classroom, because that might be interesting as well. So as Roger said, I did prepare, here's one I prepared earlier, as they say, did prepare a video because it's easier to pre-record these little demos. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will work. So please bear with me for one moment. So I'm hoping this is going to work. Just let me know if you can't hear that, Roger.
Can't hear anything.
You're not hearing the video?
No, no.
Okay, let me just see if we can fix that.
Open a new tab.
Okay.
Films blank. Open a new tab. Microsoft Teams.
I think we should be.
Calling controls toolbar.
I think we should be on now.
Switching films and TV.
More than
Films
one
and TV.
type of content at the same time on a single line. Do you have video, Roger? Now, Split Braille will work on any length of display.
Yes, we do.
But we suggest that you will have an optimal experience if you use a Braille display of 40 or more cells. Split Braille is also supported on non-Vispero Braille displays, and there are some tweaks being made to that at the moment. So if you're curious and you need to know more, please do get in touch. When you use Split Braille, as I said, you can essentially separate the display to show you two separate items or separate pieces of information. One piece of information is your live document or live email or web page or Excel sheet. The other piece of information is something that you may need to refer back to quickly and want easy access to without having to open another application or go somewhere else in the document. So let's explain to you how it works. When you have your Braille display connected, the first thing you're going to want to do is open the new Split Braille menu. This can be accomplished by pressing JAWS key, Alt, and V. So I'm going to do that now.
Select Braille view dialog. List 1 list view. No split. 1 of 8.
There are a number of pre-defined Braille views built into JAWS. And indeed, there are some extra Braille views that are application specific, which I will mention in a couple of minutes. But let's talk about what we have on screen at the moment. The first item you just heard is no split. And that's the default, and that's the way that JAWS has always behaved in the past. That means that JAWS will behave as it always did, with a single line Braille display showing you the full line that is currently in focus. I'm going to press the down arrow.
Buffered text.
This first view is called buffered text. And this is where you can determine or select or put a piece of text into a buffer and hold it there for easy access. So maybe you're looking at a Word document and you have some figures, but you want to have easy access to those figures because you need to refer back to them regularly. Well, you could have those on the right-hand side of your Braille display in the split and have your live Word document on the left-hand side. Let me down arrow again.
Annotations.
This one's really useful for those people who collaborate a lot on Word documents. I don't know about you, but I find myself frequently looking at documents where other people have commented, and I want to be able to read those comments in context. If I use the annotation view, I'm able to read the document on the left-hand side of my Braille display and the annotation to which the text refers on the right-hand side of the split.
Attribute indicators.
This is the attribute indicators. If you're doing a lot of proofreading or you want to be able to analyze or dive more into text attributes, then you can go here to turn on the attribute split. With attributes, we can determine text that's bold, italicized, or underlined. And I think over time, this might take on a bit more of a shape in terms of UEB markers. But at the moment, you have letters like B for bold, I for italics, and U for underlining.
Speech history.
This is the speech history Braille split, and this allows you to view the history of JAWS that is sent to the synthesizer. This might be useful for people who are running JAWS with Braille only, but want to be able to see what is sent to the speech buffer.
Translation split.
This is one of my favorites, translation split. This is ideal for people who are learning Braille, might be very useful for teachers. You can set up a split that has one side of the Braille display, for example, in Unified English Braille Grade 2, and the other side in Unified English Braille Grade 1. So students can see a contracted word on one side of the Braille display, and then can see the full spelling of that word in an uncontracted version on the other side.
JAWS cursor.
This is the JAWS cursor split. So you can put the JAWS cursor in a particular area or move it around, and this split will update as you move the JAWS cursor. Or you might want to put the JAWS cursor, for example, on a status line in Microsoft Word. And as you read through your document or as you type your document, you could keep an eye on that status line all the time.
Window text.
Window text is not dissimilar to JAWS cursor. It allows you to specify a window, for example, something that might update occasionally. And again, you can tie the split to that window so that you can quickly access it. Now, I did mention earlier that there are application specific splits, and there are a few worth mentioning. One in Microsoft Outlook will allow you to view your inbox message list on the left-hand side, and assuming the preview pane is turned on in Microsoft Outlook, you can get the preview of the message on the right-hand side. So you can scroll up and down through your inbox, and the preview pane changes on the right-hand side of the Braille display as you move. Another useful one in Microsoft Teams allows you to navigate through chats and view the history of the chat on the right-hand side of the split. There are two sets of dots which break the split in the center of the Braille display, so it's easy to know where one split starts and another one ends. We envisage people using split Braille in various different ways over the next little while and experimenting and playing with what works for you. So try out some of the customized settings that are already available and see how you get on. And remember, if you have questions, we provide telephone technical support and training, so don't hesitate to get in touch.
Pause button. Play button.
Okay, I'm going to stop that. So that's the split Braille. And as I say, it's available for anybody who has access to JAWS 2024, or if you want to try it out, again, get in touch with us. Of course, there's lots of interesting things coming down the tracks with multi-line Braille as well, which is something that I think we're all very excited to see. So the other thing I just wanted to briefly touch on was around note takers and how we are supporting schools, in particularly situations in mainstream schools where teachers or classroom assistants may not necessarily know Braille or may be learning Braille alongside the blind or low vision student. One of the challenges I think has always been to have a system where the teacher or classroom assistant is able to see in real time, in print, what the blind student is using in Braille. And there are various solutions available, including hardwiring monitors to note takers like the Braille Sense, for example. But in the last couple of years, we've been playing with a couple of off-the-shelf standard packages, and some of these solutions are free. So one example is to set up a Zoom meeting from the note taker, so from a Braille Sense, and simply share your screen on the Zoom meeting and invite somebody to join that meeting on a tablet or mobile phone. So that could be somebody sitting beside the student, joining that meeting and watching the share of their screen in real time. The other one we've been using for some time now is the TeamViewer application and the TeamViewer remote control. The mobile version of which is called TeamViewer Quick Assist, which allows you to, again, share your screen. TeamViewer has clamped down a little bit lately on the access to that service. So if you don't have a paid TeamViewer account, it's not always easy to get connected, and it can be a little bit sporadic. So the other one we've looked at is something called ScreenStream. ScreenStream has two ways of sharing the screen. One via the internet. So that means that you could share your screen and be in one location and have somebody helping you maybe over the phone somewhere else looking at your screen because they're connected to your screen. Or it can do a local connection on your local network. And this can be useful in a school scenario where maybe the network is tied down, and I guess a lot of schools now are becoming very security conscious. So we are looking at a local solution where a screen share can be set up between two different devices on the same network. The ScreenStream application is free from the Google Play Store, and ScreenStream you can find the screen stream that it creates using any browser. So whether you're using a mobile browser or connecting via a computer, you can access that share. So I think some of the ways in which we can make sure that visually impaired students, Braille students, have the very best possible opportunity is making sure that the sighted people who are supporting and working with them have a fully understanding of the Braille technology that they're using. And these tools, extra tools that we can make available, certainly help in that regard. I'm very happy to be here again. Thanks to Roger and the team for the invitation, and look forward to any questions afterwards. And Roger, happy to hand back to you.
Stuart, thank you very much for enlightening us about new developments in a well-established product and those other applications you've mentioned. I'd like to just ask Helen. I know there was something else you wanted to share with us, Helen.
Yes, absolutely. When some weeks ago for TechShare Pro, we did something called What 10 Things. It's on the UKAAF homepage of the website, and it's all about the guidance that we provide at UKAAF. And obviously we provide a whole host of guidance, quite a lot in-depth guidance. However, to get people started and to make accessible content, I've always been a profound believer it's everybody's responsibility. And after some conversations, getting people started is quite a challenge sometimes because people assume it is very complex. Now, obviously, accessibility is quite a big domain, but some of the really easy and simple things, or those quick wins, can actually make a significant difference for people accessing content. And what I'm going to do is I'll share my screen, because this was the last slide we had at TechShare Pro on the video that we gave to them. And it's a survey that we'd really like some input on. So let me share briefly. I hope you can, that's come up on the screen now. So really it's kind of what type of bite-sized guidance could we address two things with, really. So firstly, for the accessibility community, what are the absolute basics of digital accessibility that, if adopted, could make the biggest impact to addressing accessible everyday content? And that's some of those very, very simple things like headings, which a lot of people still don't know how to use. And obviously there's many things that people have that are barriers to using technology that are simple. But also, what of those basic principles of bite-sized guidance would be ideal for beginners at any age to start learning about, including at schools? And on screen is a QR code, sorry, my mind went blank, a QR code for you to kind of access the survey. Or if you're not able to do it today, if you go to the UKAAF.org homepage, it's actually on the screen about halfway down. But any input on this would be incredibly helpful, because it gives us a steer in terms of the types of bite-sized guidance we could develop at UKAAF. So yeah, so thank you, Roger. Thank you for the opportunity for doing that one. That's really helpful.
Thank you very much, Helen. I'm just going to ask all our three presenters briefly to say, if we come back in a year's time, what would you like and hope will have happened in 2024 with products, accessibility, etc.? Ed, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you. Well, obviously I have running a small manufacturing business. I have all sorts of things which I very much hope have happened in 2024 for my own business and for my own customers. But speaking more generally, I think it would be really interesting if we had the same conversation in January 2025, and we were talking about a new use of Braille in a different field, which wasn't a regular use of, wasn't something Braille was regularly used for at all. But it turns out that this transformative code can unlock something new, which was previously considered not really appropriate for tactile reading. That's what I'm kind of agnostic as to what that is. I told you all the different areas that I'm looking into personally, but there's so many different places where tactile reading could unlock something which is not currently useful.
Ed, thank you very much, and that's a great example of looking forward, wanting to open up new and unexplored areas. Stuart, what about you?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I suppose I'm really interested and very excited by all the multi-line Braille that we're seeing, and clearly a lot of people are working really hard and doing lots of great things to bring multi-line Braille to us as quickly as possible. I'm hoping that the screen reading industry will step up now and work out a way to make that multi-line Braille operate in a cohesive way with their software. I think the way in which you use multi-line Braille with a screen reader is going to be very different to how we have traditionally used single-line Braille. So I suppose if we were here this time next year, I'd really like to think that we have made some strides in that regard, and that we're going to be moving in the right direction.
Stuart, thank you very much. Helen.
Yeah, I think if I was to go 12 months from now, I think I'd love to see more awareness on the school curriculum. I think BSL is coming in, there's some GCSEs coming. I think things like Braille, assistive technologies really need to the profile needs to be raised. Young people currently learn about things like data protection and online security, and I'd just love to see more of accessibility in terms of content, in terms of assistive technologies, just sort of added to that, because I think, you know, as software and hardware kind of progresses, as Sean said on the video, it needs to become as recognised as other mainstream things. I think he particularly mentioned captions on TV. People know all about that, and I think there's a lot more that can be sort of said in terms of the blind community and Braille and assistive technologies. So that, I think that would be my wish for 2024.
Brilliant. And I'm sure that if anyone with us today has any ideas, certainly in terms of Ed's product, I'm sure he wouldn't mind receiving emails being sent to Bristol Braille Technology, and also Stuart at Sight and Sound. And excellent. Well, thank you all very much. So in closing, I should like to thank our presenters, Helen, Stuart and Ed. And Stuart, I'm really sorry that it was technology that was
no problem, Roger.
causing problems, but so delighted that it worked out. And thanks, for very enormous thanks to Helen for behind the scenes assistance. And of course, thank you to all our guests for attending, and to those who will be joining this webinar online in the future. So from us all, goodbye until next time. Thank you.